You know what? Nope. I'm not even ready to look at this. Nope. Give me a minute. Welcome to my little piece of paradise. Today we're looking at the gas tank of my 79 Suzuki. There's a bit of a ding on the side of it. In actual fact, it's a pretty big ding, probably a junk tank. And before you all go out and start calling the abused motorcycle helpline, I want to say that this was the result of a tip over during transport, not, as one would otherwise suspect, the result of a tip over during riding. We'd improperly secured it, and she went over and threw a strap while the truck went over a bump, freeing her to take a little rest on the bar running along the top of the trailer. The way we lifted her up, got her home, and bombed a bit of a primer on it to delay the rust until I could bear to look at it. Besides the tank, the bike is undamaged, and I hope that one day she will forgive me. And once we dried our tears, we're ready to get to work. In this video, we'll be roughing it out to prepare for filler and eventual paint. So the first step in our repair, we're going to use a fiber wheel to remove the paint from the damaged area, as well as about a 1-inch radius, which will allow our stud welder to get in and to ensure good metal-on-metal contact with the entire tip of the stud welder. The reason I'm using a fiber wheel compared to a 36 grit disc is that the fiber wheel tends to leave a very smooth, almost polished surface. And like most motorcycle tanks of this vintage, we're dealing with 18 or 19 gauge steel, which is about twice as thick as most modern automotive panels. So we're expecting a little bit of a fight getting this dent out, especially with all the stretched and work-hardened metal around the high points. With our repair area stripped, we'll need to address the risk of explosion before we can introduce heat. A week or so ago, I drained the tank and left it open for a few days before treating it with fogging oil. To be extra safe, we'll purge it today with compressed air, and we can follow that up with a barbecue lighter to verify that the internal environment is non-flammable. It's a good idea to keep a fire extinguisher handy and to familiarize yourself with this operation. I've never seen one of these things blow up, but one does hear stories. Now we can weld our studs. I'm using an H&S AutoShot 4550. Pretty good value unisputter on the lower end of the price range. I've done an unboxing first impressions vid, so check that out if you'd like to learn more about it. Suffice it to say it handled this job just fine. You want to run studs along the low spots, in this case it's a ridge, every 2 to 3 inches. Again, we'll be working with heat in proximity to gasoline residue, so it's a good idea to keep the gas cap off. Well, it's definitely a good idea to keep the gas cap off, as well as your common sense about you. Now, I'd initially tried to set up a pull on my bench, but quickly realized that I didn't have sufficient number of arms to make that work. So I mounted the tank back on the motorcycle and strapped the bike up to a welding bench to prevent tipping, because it matters at this point. In my experience, it's best to pull by hand before resorting to more aggressive means, so that's what I tried first. Starting from the edges, I pulled with the T-handle and used my body hammer to tap down the high spots. If you're familiar with body repair, you'll know that the T-handle is essentially the dolly to my hammer. Pull firmly on the handle and strike with light to medium force on the edge of the dent. This will tend to pull the center of the panel into a new position, and the stretched metal from the hammered high spots will help it to stay in place. Unfortunately, in this case, the metal was too thick for this method to be effective, so I was forced to use the slide hammer. Now, the slide hammer is one of those tools that I avoid whenever possible. In my time working in various collision shops, I can't remember ever seeing any of the other techs use one. Now, granted, we were pretty spoiled with all our hydraulic rams and pulling towers, and nobody's going to have that kind of equipment at home. For this repair, we've got no other good options, so here we are. It's not very precise, and you'll find that it's very easy to overpull the panel, especially the thinner sheet used on cars. Don't stay in one place, move from stud to stud frequently, working the repair area up gradually with a series of medium-strength blows. Maintain tension on the T-handle and strike the panel firmly but in a controlled fashion. And don't go too far. Leave the repair area slightly low within a 1/4 inch of actual. Don't slam too hard or you may leave a high spot or even tear the metal. Once you've got rough alignment, you can go back and do fine adjustments with a hammer and pick, or you can trim off the studs and put some more pins to work out the low spots. Now to remove the studs, usually it's possible to grab them with pliers and twist them off. In this case, I didn't want to risk tearing the metal, so I snipped them and ground the heads off with a 3/8 inch cutoff wheel. Now, in order to provide a suitable surface for the body filler, I then had to buzz the whole area with 36 grit on a 6-inch disc. So by some strange fate, after going over the panel with 36 grit, I've actually got this thing fairly close. It's definitely a fairly large repair area, and I don't think this is ever going to be a perfect 10. But overall, things went pretty well, and I'm ready to call it a day. The next installment will be laying some of that sweet, sweet Pondo and getting this tank ready for prime. In the meantime, we'll take this win. Thanks for watching.